In this lecture, we are going to discuss the functions in C++. Okay, so let's discuss the overview of functions. That the in real life, we often find ourselves doing the same task over and over and again and again. For example, making toast and jam for the breakfast in the morning. So, in other words, taking a breakfast in the morning and every morning, and then the driving car from home to work and from work to home. So in similar way, there are maybe other tasks that you are doing in a similar way to repeat it again and again on the daily basis, maybe weekly basis, or it maybe occurs on monthly basis as well. These are the tasks which repeat again and again. Okay. Now, once we decided the favorite way of doing the task. So normally we write it down on the page or on some note. For example, making a recipe card for making the breakfast items. For a favorite breakfast, we follow the recipe written by someone else. Okay, so the same way we can do it for our lunch, for our dinner, for any other meal, that we write down the recipe and that can be shared with any other to replicate it or to recall it and use it, reuse it actually, to make their meal properly according to the written recipe. So functions in C++ can actually be used much in the same way. Just like in our routine, we are doing a task, we write the description of that task and share that description with others to reuse that description for their task. Okay, so in C++, we can introduce functions that can be written and can be reused again and again in a similar way that we do in our daily life. So the description that we write for recipe, for example, in C++, instead we call it a function in the C++. So first we declare a function or define a function actually. Define the function, declare or define the function, and then we call that function in our main program, okay, in the C++. Okay, so this approach is a big time saver for the programmers, for the C++ programmer or any other, language programmers. They can focus on implementing and debugging smaller pieces of the code. So normally our functions are very specific to the task. So the more specific the task, the more easier to define and declare the functions. And then obviously the more easy to implement, debug those smaller pieces and functions of that code, and then reuse of that code again and again. Okay, so functions play an important role in software development. For example, you can split a large problem into small pieces. For example, this is a large problem, and you can split into the small pieces of the problems. Then it's very easy to deal with these small pieces of the problem. Okay, so you can easily code for this problem, even for this small piece and this one and this one. Then you can test this problem. Similarly, you can test this one and the last one as well. So then you can call it all these functions in the main program so that you may solve a big problem in a very manageable form. Okay, functions in the same category, functions in the same category. It means as functions with almost similar nature can be categorized and packaged together to create a function library. Okay, just like library in the C++ that we have for input output, for string, for manipulation, for mathematics, for random numbers, etc. So in similar way, we can define our own libraries, the custom defined libraries or user defined libraries, which may comprise of functions of the same category. So first of all, we should see how to declare a function. So in order to declare a function in C++, we need to provide the following information, and that is actually name of the function, list of operations to be performed. We should write it down. What specific tasks are there to be performed by this function. Okay. Type of data value to be returned. Okay. Functions can also return the data to another function where we can cache that data and utilize it there. Okay. So you can also list the type of data which can be returned, types and names of parameters. We can pass different data, different parameters to the function so that function may process on that data as per the defined task. Okay, so we call those types and as parameters. We will see how can we define parameters for a function so that a function may accept it from the outside world. Declaration of local variables. So, okay, any variables that is defined in a function is known as local variable to that function. Okay, there may be global variable as well. So, global variable are those variable which define outside of the function, even outside of the main function. The last one is value to be returned to the main program. Okay, so this can be combined with the type of data that is returned actually. Okay, so we need actually to list out all these requirements to define a function. We will start it from the simple example and will lead to the complex example. So let's see. Function return values. So let's discuss those points in detail here. Uh, we need a function return value. So how can we return those values? By using the return statement inside the function. Okay. So by using this return reserve keyword in the function, we can easily return any value from the function. There can be, different types of returning values, like mathematical functions usually return the float values, and input output functions usually return the error and success flag or input data from the user. And even some functions do not return any value, so that can be defined by void. Okay, so this is an example that we will now see that how can we define a function. So we will need to declare an integer variable. Then prompt the user. We will use for this prompt cout and then cn so that a message may be displayed on the screen, and we will ask the user to input a value in that defined variable. So that input should be in between 1 and 9. Read the integer value from the user. So we are using actually cn for this statement in the C++ programming. Then check the range of the input value. For this purpose, we will use if condition. So we can easily then check the range of the input variable. Okay, perform calculations on input value, and then we will, after checking the range, if the value is in the boundary of the defined range, so then we will perform the calculation on that input value. Okay, we will define a function for this task and we'll package it in a function, and that function will be called in the main function so that we may reuse it. For example, let's name the function with the name lucky. You need to give the return value, return type. Okay, so return type here is integer, name of the function is lucky, and we also need to write down the parentheses. So this is the syntax of the definition of a function. So we need the return type, name of the function, and parentheses here. So for the time being, there are no parameters. Okay, and then curly brackets are necessary to be code with the function body. So this is known as the body of the function, and this is the header of the function. Okay. So return type here in this function is integer. Name of the function here is lucky, and we have introduced the parenthesis for the function. This is now is the opening and closing curly braces, which defines the body of this function. Okay, so in our previous slide, we listed that we need an integer number. So here you can see that we have defined a number, a variable of type integer. Then we are going to prompt a message to the user asking to input a value in between 1 and 9. Okay, so then cn used so that we may pick a number from the user and save it in the variable number. Okay, so then we are checking, the range of the inputted number. So if that number is greater than or equal to 1 and that number is less than or equal to 9, so that will be an acceptable number to our function. Then we will perform the processing part or the formula part that we want to implement it on the number, and that is actually number is equal to, this is the assignment operator, 42 divided by that number. Okay, so this is just an example of any random formula. Okay, so a value will be returned by this formula and will be saved in the number. Okay, so and that number will be returned through this gateway. The type of the returning value shall be same as defined here in the return type of integer. So if you want to return any character, so the return type here shall be a character. If you want to return any float from here, so the return type, the return gateway shall be a float data type. Okay. So this is a small functions that actually we define for a number which shall be in a range from 1 to 9, and then we process that number. After processing, we are returning the updated value of that number through this gateway, the integer data type. Okay, so the name of this function is lucky, and we will call this function in another main function. So let's see. Okay, operations to be performed by this function. So this is function declaration or function definition. You can function definition. So now we have defined a function, and this function is also called as user-defined function or custom defined function or custom functions. Okay. So because this is not built-in function, we have a number of built-in functions that exist in the C++ or any other language. For example, we use the power function of the math library actually. So power is a built-in function which we have in the C++ with C++ compiler. But this function is now defined by the programmer, by you. So therefore, this function or the kind of these functions are known as programmer defined or user defined or custom defined functions. Okay. So how can we call a function actually? So for this purpose, we need the following. We need to specify the following. How can we call a functions? So we need the following to be included in our main function, and for that purpose, the name of the function that we have defined. So actually in previous slides we have defined a function with name lucky. And if we want to pass any parameter, if there is any. So in our function there are no parameters. And operations to be performed in the main function. In the main function with the return value. So from our example in the previous slide, we have returned a value of type integer. Okay. So here you can see the example. This is our main function, and in that main function, we have called the function lucky. Okay. So now lucky is actually a function that we have defined somewhere else, okay, and we are calling that function, and that function is actually accepting no parameters, but returning a value which we are going to save it in the num. Num is a variable which is defined in the main function. So actually we are catching that return value into the num. So whatever the returning value type is shall be assigned to the same data type in the calling function. Okay. So because lucky is returning the integer value, so therefore we have defined integer num, and num is equal to lucky. So num is an integer, and the value coming there from is also an integer. So that value will be assigned to the variable num. So we are going to operate on this num. Actually, we want to print out the value on the screen. So this is the operation that we are going to perform on that return value. So see out your lucky number is num. So the return value which will be saved in the num will print out on the screen. Okay, so how can we see the execution using black box technique? So this is the example that we have a main function, we have the user defined function, and the main function is calling the user defined function and its execution. Then that lucky function, the user defined function, is returning a value, and that value is saved actually in num. Okay, so now you have seen how can we call a function from the main function. So in similar way, we can call that function again. We have called it here for the first time. Then we call this function again in the next statement. So you can call that function again and again, and that function will be performed again and again and will return the value as per the processing of that function. So see out your lucky number is num. Okay. So as we are asking from the user in lucky function, they input a value, and that value is actually processed in the division part, in the processing part of the division, and then the answer of that division is returned to the num, and that num is being printed here on the screen. So we are going to call again that function. So we are actually asking the user again to input another number, and then we are printing that value. So the value here inputted can be different from the value inputted before. Okay. Okay, so it is not necessary, just like in previous example, that we catch or save the return value in same variable like this one. Huh? This is the num, this is again the num, and we are saving the return value in same variable. You can just change the variable like this one. Okay. So the return value from this lucky will be saved in num, and the return value from this lucky will be saved in the value. Okay, and we can then proceed to the next lines and statements. Okay, this is another example with multiple return statement from the user-defined functions. Okay, so this is a user-defined function where we have introduced two return statement, and it is possible. Okay, but at a time one return statement will execute. Remember, for example, we want to find out the ratio of height to weight. So we need a height and weight as integer parts, data types. Then we are asking the user of the software, the user of the program, that enter your height in inches. Okay, so that height value will be saved in the height variable, and then again we are asking for the user weight. So that weight value will be saved in the weight variable. If height is greater than 0, this is a condition, and weight is greater than 0, then this formula will be executed. Okay, height divided by weight, and it's obvious that this is a division, and value will be returned from the arithmetic logic unit, and that value will be returned through this return statement using this float. Else, if height is equal to 0 or less than 0 and weight is less than or weight is less than or equal to 0, so either of these two variables, if equal to 0 or less than 0, so else will be executed, and in that case we will see that -1 is returned through this gateway. Okay, so there are two return statements that has been introduced in the using if else conditional statement. So here, this is a kind of programming tip. They prefer to have only one return statement in your user-defined function. So how can we do this with our previous example, with this example? Because here we have two return statements, okay? So we can easily introduce a single return statement by introducing one more variable where we can save actually the value returned by this division or the value -1. So one of these will be executed and will be saved in the result variable, and that result, either this one or this one of these will come to the return statement here, and the result will return through single this statement using this gateway. So in this example, actually, we have replaced the two return statements while introducing a single result variable here, and we are going to decide either the value of the division or -1. So it depends on the condition of the if else statement, and then returning the value of that result using single return statement. Now, that functions, the magic function here in this, this is the user-defined function. The name of this function is magic. This magic function has been called here in the, for example, the main function. Main function. Okay. Okay. So this function, this magic function will cause the main program to jump to the magic function. Okay. So execution will actually jump to the magic function, and that function will be executed. And after execution, that function will return a value. It will return a value, and that value will save in the value variable. Okay. So magic is actually returning a float variable. So therefore, we are saving that value into the float type variable. This is value. Okay. So these are the processing parts of the main function and not the user-defined function. Okay. So what we are doing actually is to perform some more operation on this return value, and we have introduced the if else statement here. If else f statement here. So if value is less than 0, so print out you are silly. Okay. So else if value is less than 2, so you are underweight, and else if value is greater than 3, so you are under tall. So this is what the processing part on the returned value in the main function. Okay, another simple example to introduce the custom defined function is, for example, we want to print a name by defining our user defined function. So let's say this is the user defined function void. You can write void, or you can just ignore the void. Then because this function will not return any message or any variable or value, void print body of the custom defined function, cout hello world. Okay, so this is the user defined function. Now this function can be called in the main function, and let's see how. Integer main function with parentheses, and you can just write down the name of that function, print with terminator. So this is the way how can we call the user-defined function. Okay. So because this function does not return any value, so no need to write any variable with the assignment operator just before the print function. So you can end up with this function with return 0 because we have return here in the main function. Okay. What this main function actually perform is to call this function. This function will execute, and this function actually print the output on the console screen, and the execution will then come back to the function to the next line. Okay, so this is the return 0, and return 0 will return the 0, and your program will halt. So this is a very simple example how to call a function from the main function, how to define user-defined function. Okay, so there can be many types. For example, introducing return type, just we have seen in our previous slides. We can also introduce some parameters here. So let's see how can we pass parameters to the function. Okay, this is another example that shows a user-defined function. Okay, and a main function. So this is a main function. You know that it is a necessary part of any program in the C++. So you must introduce a main function in your program. Main function where we will, call this function to perform addition between the two variables, and it will return a value, the value of addition through this gateway, and we will cache that value in here in this main function. Okay, so how can we do it? The execution will start from the main function. Remember, always execution starts from the main function. Execution starts from this main function. Then the declaration will be performed, and the memory space will be reserved for these two variables. Then a message will be prompted to the user on the console screen, and the user will be then required to input two values in the variable x and variable y. Those two values will be saved. The first value will be saved in the x, and the second value will be saved in the y. So in this statement, we will have two variables with values inputted from the user. Then the execution will execute, the processor will actually execute this statement. And this statement is actually the combination of declaration in the assignment and calling of a function. So this function actually return a value of type integer which will be assigned to the sum variable. Okay, so when execution reaches here to this function, so the user-defined function will be called. This is our user-defined function. Execution will come to this part. Okay. So the values from the user will receive here in these two variables. So the value of x will be assigned to A, and the value of y will be assigned to B. It's just like A is equal to x and B is equal to y. So these two operations will be performed here, and this is called as the parameter of this, the user-defined function. And if we pass the values, so actually these values are known as arguments that we are passing to the user-defined function. The execution will then enter to the body of this function. This is the body of the function. So here we can see that return is going to return something, and what is that something is actually a mathematical formula. So first the arithmetical formula will be performed by the processor, that is arithmetic logic unit. So what will it do is to add the value of A to the B, and we will receive a single value from the arithmetic logic unit, and that single value will be returned through to this gateway integer. Okay. Now the execution will come back to the main function. Let me make here. to the main function here, because the value is going to be returned, so that value will be assigned to the integer sum. Actually, that value will be saved in the sum. Then the execution will come to the next line, and that line is going to print the value of x, then plus in double quotes, then the value of y, and then equal sign in the double quotes, and then the value of sum, which was stored saved here using the by calling a function user-defined function. Okay. If we illustrate this example with some values, so how will it look like? So let's see. If execution start from here, okay, so a declaration will be performed, then a user message will be prompted on the screen, and then two values are required from the user to be inputted to the program. Okay, so how we will see these two values inside the memory is, if the user gives input here in the cn statement, like if user input, for example, 4, and then user enter another value on the console screen, that value will save in y, for example, 6. Okay, so now x is equal to 4 and y is equal to 6. Then the execution will come to this statement, and in this statement we know that a function has been called here. Okay, so x and y actually will be replaced with 4 and 6. These values will actually be passed with the calling of the function. So the execution will actually come to the function here along with those two values 4 and 6. Okay, so through this way we are actually passing 4 and 6, so 4 will be saved in the A and 6 will be saved in B. So you can say A is equal to x is equal to 4, while B is equal to y is equal to 6. Okay, so these two values will be received inside the body of the function here in this statement. So 4 will be added to the 6, and we will get 10, and this 10 will be returned by using this reserve keywords return statement, and this is through the gateway of the return type integer. So we will see the execution will come back. The execution is coming back, and that value will be assigned, actually that value is 10, which is coming through this line, this execution path. That 10 will be assigned to some variable sum. Now the execution in the main program will execute this statement. So here the value of x is equal to 4 will be printed on the screen, then plus will be printed on the screen, then value of y is 6. So we will see 6 on the screen, and then equal sign we will see it on the screen, and then the value of sum is equal to 10. So this will be the exact answer of these two input values. Okay, so this function can be called again and again and again. For example, we can call that function again by prompt a message to the user that please input two numbers or two values, two numbers again. Okay, this is simple a message. It will be printed as it is on the screen, and then we will save those two variables again in the defined variable here in the main function. Okay, which are x and y. We remember that a and b in the user-defined functions are not accessible in the main function. Okay? And x and y cannot be accessed there in the user-defined function. Okay? So cn x and then y. So user will input two values. The first value or first number will be saved in the x and second will be saved in the y. And then again, because sum has already been declared there, so we don't need to declare it again. We just need to write sum is equal to, call the function again and pass the values x, values of x and y. And then you can print again, see out x plus enclosing the double quotes and then value of y and then equal sign enclosing the double quotes and then value of sum and then enclose the main function. So this is the main function, okay, the body of the main function. Here you can see starting from here, body of the main function, ending it here. So this is the body of the main function where we have called add function 2 times. So it means that we can call this function again and again in the main function as well as in any other user defined function. Okay. So here we have discussed that a function may have some parameter list. Okay. So as you can see here in the definition of the user defined function. So this is the user-defined function. Okay. So this is the user-defined function which has two parameters. Two parameters. One is A and the second is B. And type of both variables or both parameter is integer. Okay. So it's just like the declaration of other usual variables in the body of the function. Okay. So what it actually does is this parameter list receive the values when you call function from the main function. Okay, when you call it from the main function. So here we are passing two variables, the two arguments which are received here by the two parameters. One is integer a and second is integer b. Remember that the values here you are passing in the main function must have data type equal to the data type of the parameters. Okay, so here the type of parameter a is integer while the type of parameter b is also integer. So therefore we must pass two integer values from here so that these values may be received correctly by the two variables. Okay, integer a and integer b. So this is known as parameter list. So the number of argument that you are passing shall be equal to the number of parameter list here. And then we also discuss this, how can values be returned through a return gateway, return type. Okay, so the value you are going to return shall be equal or have similar return type here defined in the header of the user defined function. Okay, so that values then are actually the caged in the main function or any other function where you are going to call this user defined function. Okay, so we are catching that value through calling this function in the variable sum. Okay, so it is also important that the value which is returning from the function and the type in which you are going to save that value shall be same. It means that the variable that you are utilizing for saving the returning value shall have same types. Okay,